Thanks. I'm back. Professor R. Vaidyanathan. He's a professor of finance and control at the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. And I have been given the demanding responsibility of introducing him in 30 seconds. Well, I know that I need at least 30 minutes to do the same. Please read about him in the invitation card. His accomplishments are the stuff of legend, and many of us can only dream of becoming somebody like him. It will perhaps suffice to say that he's a great teacher, and I have been one of his forgettable students. He's been named as one of the 10 best professors from all the IIMs by Business Today magazine. And this is something that I can personally vouch for. His lectures used to be the only ones which we used to enjoy and learn also. His current projects include tax havens and the implications for emerging markets. He's also writing a book called In Praise of Heterogeneity. It is my honor and privilege to invite Professor Vaidyanathan to deliver the keynote address of this year's Universal Brotherhood Day. Professor.
Respected Motilal ji, Sanjay, and all the friends who have assembled here. Narasimhan was my student. I have given him grade long time before, but still he seems to be, prizing me and right. And Sanjay mentioned about that I have been working in this area of black money and tax haven for a long period of time. I am delighted because in another context, in another auditorium, the person who introduced was so enthusiastic. He mentioned that Professor Vaidyanathan is involved with black money for the last 10 years. So I have to, but that way Sanjay at least was correct in his introduction. My students always used to say 3 things you should never do. One is talking about virus and hacking in Bangalore. That is one area where you don't talk about it in Bangalore. And political intrigue in Delhi. And black money in Bombay. So these are the 3 things which you should, because you are carrying coal to Newcastle, and that's an old proverb. Current proverb is sandalwood to Veerappan, that type of a. So talking about black money in Bombay is something highly, hilarious type of a, because I'm sure, people here are significantly knowledgeable. And actually the student who presented his paper really covered most of the interesting areas. I would like to appreciate him actually for that. Now this has become, of course, a very, what one can call a major issue. And after all, various type of agitations, and somebody even tied me a, what do you call, in support of Anna, one of the Rakis was tied. Only one thing intrigues me as a business management professor. Motilal is also there. So what is that intrigues me is, there is a significant amount of silence among big business about this whole issue. I wanted actually CII to organize a major conference. If I see CII to come forward, large number of these, huge business conglomerates and houses. Somehow, as of now, I'm not telling everyone, but the mainstream is observing it, or some survey was presented yesterday or today, how the CEOs feel that, they are all with Anna, but anonymously they are with Anna. So why the large business groups are? If you closely observe, 2-3 things are very important. This issue of corruption and black money is, corruption invariably generates black money. That's something which we should, X implies Y. But you can also generate black money without corruption. In other words, it is possible because monetization of the economy is not much another thing. A lot of transactions take place in the economy which is not intended to generate black money, but it can easily generate black money. So from the point of view of corruption, what happened is larger business interests are able to absorb it. And sometimes what is loosely called passing it on to the consumer. Pass it on to the, any benefit we would like to pass it on to the customer, and corruption they feel is a major benefit which should be passed on to the customer. Because of the facility, corporate forms gives you the facility to write off, as it used to be told in my, earlier accounting days, somebody's, father died and then he did the funeral and other thing. Finally asked the Munimji to come and, write it off. Then he told, how can it be written off? This is packing and forwarding charges. So you write it off. So the facility is available. So we have to be very clear, very interesting actually. The smaller your size is, greater is your impact of corruption. The smaller people, smaller entrepreneurs, smaller businesses. For instance, I'll give you an example. My flower vendor, he does something like 250, 300 rupees per day of turnover. We are not talking about profit or anything. In some good days, it could be 500 rupees. Out of this 300 rupee, something like 25 to 30 rupees goes in corruption. Either to the local cops or local bullies, hundreds of. So on a gross turnover, you can imagine if it is of the order of 10%, what is the nature of the impact? And she borrows at something like, 0.25%, 0.5% per day. So borrowing cost is also phenomenally higher. And the same thing, the fast food joint, or what we call in Bangalore, the Darshini restaurant, small fellows who run. And sometimes the food is prepared in the side of the platform and given. Every week he has to provide in an envelope money to the food and adulteration fellows. As if, that these fellows are, nobody has ever died eating that food in the history of our area. But there is one big department for this, consisting of some inspectors, and they come and then periodically collect. It's not something, these are not anymore secret or anything. So smaller you go, larger is the impact of this corruption. My estimate suggests 30% they say about average tax rate and other thing. Effective tax rate is something like 45 to 50% in our country. If you include bribe tax also as part of the tax rate. This bribe tax is enormously all-pervading, actually. What you may loosely call whom-to-tomb tax it is, actually. Whom-to-tomb. That is birth certificate to death certificate. But the fascinating point about it is, my birth certificate, I did not bribe. My parents would have bribed. And my death certificate, I need not bribe. My wife will bribe. So these two spectrum, you don't have to, but it is indulged in. And in between, throughout your life, any activity. And this is what is the critical nature of the anger of the middle class of this country, which I think, very interestingly, the political formations have not understood. Both the ruling group as well as the opposition, I think, have not really understood the nature of the anger which is building up. My colleague from Shanghai University of Finance and Economics, we are doing some joint project. She wrote to me very interestingly. She told, it's very surprising. In India, your political parties have been taken by surprise. In other words, there is a huge space which was available. That space has been occupied by other groups, whatever you call it, civil society groups. Or he was telling in there recently they had a huge, what one can call a accident of the speed train. And the government there told the news agencies, don't publish anything about this, damaging another thing. But somebody, independent fellows in the internet, because of the availability of this social media also in China, he spread it. And finally, their own government newspaper has also to come out. And then they try to hush it up in terms of constituting a commission consisting of fellows who provided the equipment for the speed train to investigate the matter. But that was also brought out, and it's a turning point, if one can call it, in the Chinese public discourse. She was telling she's enormously surprised. So why this has happened? why the political formations, both ruling and opposition, are taken completely, I would say, they did not understand what is happening actually. Three things. One is what you can loosely call the Nehruvian tripod, I call it. He built it on three-legged stool. Socialism, secularism, and parliamentary system. You look back, socialism is gone, except in our constitution. Instantly we are still a socialist republic. You have to swear by it in order to win any election. But we all know that's gone. Secularism is in tatters. Secularism is, except, you can tell somebody you are communal and somebody will say you are secular and people will. It has become some sort of a abusive word on either side. So that is also gone. The third leg of the stool is now shaking. There is a huge fault line is developing. I think this is the area of concern when we talk about black money. What is the fault line? There is a massive middle class which has come about in this country. Middle class of maybe, give or take, your estimate may be different than mine. It could be 10 crore, 15 crores, depending upon, which statistics you believe or something. Something like 15 to 20 crore is my estimate, is what you may loosely call the middle class in the country. This is having a huge fault line with the elected people. There is a massive gap between the elected representatives and this class, particularly at the local level. For instance, I was looking at the Bangalore Municipal Corporation representatives. None of them have got any links with this middle class. It is all thronging in that Freedom Park and shouting against Anna. The Bangalore Municipal Corporation fellows, 75% of them are traditional piece rate contractors who used to lay roads and road on road and road on road and never road and all that thing. They are all in the elected position. I'm sure it would be something similar. Here may be higher magnitude, not just piece rate contractor. They may be real estate magnate. It doesn't matter. So this is what is the huge fault line which is developing. I think all political parties have to be extraordinarily cautious about it. This fault line is not sustainable in the long run. In order to run, you can go on telling, we have a parliamentary system of democracy, where the MPs have to decide another thing. But the trust deficit is very large. And you can't have a trust deficit with this emerged, not emerging, emerged middle class, whether it is right or wrong. What type of a trust deficit? One can go on giving hundreds of examples. Two of them come to my mind. In 62, during the this Chinese conflict, I was a school student. I remember the leaders like K. Kamaraj and others used to go in this jeep asking for funds, right? Including my auntie. They gave their bangles and chains. People gave it actually, physically gave it at the spot without thinking about what they are. But today, when I was asking my sister, she says, if somebody comes in jeep, I will hold my chain tightly and run into the house. Because worried that he will take it away. So phenomenal trust deficit we have developed, whether one likes it or not. Second is, last week I was traveling to Bombay for something else. So one leader was going with large amount of, major leader, I don't want to name him, and it doesn't matter, with large amount of police force around him. So one young girl was standing, I was also standing in the queue, we were all. So that young girl in Kannada told her Amma, that is her mother, you ashtu dodda kallaru hoidare. Such a big thief is going, she told. Dacoit is going. Her mother was trying to wish, keep quiet, and everybody laughed. Then it struck me actually, the security provided for our leaders are actually for us, not for them. This is something which we have to be very, very clear, because if that has not been provided, he would have picked my pocket. Right? So whenever I meet this, media people, they all criticize, they write, too much SPG, too much time is wasted, too much police is wasted in minister. No, give more. More SPG cover, more black cover, because we have to be safe. Women in this country have to be safe. Our pockets have to be safe. This is the approach which has come. This is the level of the trust deficit. And this is something which I think we have to bridge it. It is the responsibility of the ruling party, opposition party, whatever it is, to look at this issue very, very cautiously and very, very seriously. It's not something which can be brushed aside. And that is what is represented in terms of huge number of people coming on the road. Whenever some, this type of what one can call a genuine call is made. Okay, having said that, the first and foremost is we did differentiate between corruption and black money. Corruption generates black money, but black money is generated in so many other contexts. And for instance, I may go to a doctor, have a consultation, give him 500 rupees, and then, it's not, essentially, I'm not indulging in a corrupt activity. I'm just giving him cash because of convenience and other. It's quite possible that he may convert it into black money. So there is quite, unintended. I am not indulging in corruption, but he may not show the entire amount in terms of his requirements and other things. Second is, there is always a big issue about domestic versus foreign black money. Domestic black money, let us be very clear, is a no confidence on the government of India. People are not enthusiastic with the government for various reasons. So domestic black, but the foreign black money is a no confidence on the entire Indian society itself. There is a lot of difference between the two. And domestic black money, let us be clear, except in the film context where they open a Godrej Almera and full of cash is shown, it is not kept like that. Domestic black money actually rotates. And any type of funds in business rotates. Farther away from white, faster it rotates. This is the fundamental finance principle. If it is far away from white color, the money rotates much faster. So significant amount of domestic black money is actually propelling our economy. Let's be very, my estimate is up to 2% of our growth rate is due to domestic black money. So if you are talking of 8.5, that 2% at least could be, because huge amount of credit requirements of large portion of unorganized sector is met by this only in one way or other. For instance, trade constitute in our country something like, say, 16% of our GDP. Last year, 60 lakh crores, something like 10 lakh crore is the share of the trade. Trade is slightly higher than manufacturing actually. Not many people even know about it. And trade would have required something like 7.5 to 8 lakh crore in terms of its credit requirement. Because large amount of trade, capital is primarily working capital. Except for the large malls and other things which are coming. Otherwise, at the retail level and other. Of this, 7.5 to 8 lakh crore, hardly 4 lakh was supplied by the institutional mechanism in the country. So the remaining 4 lakh has to have come from other sources. Could be money lender, could be various other type of. So domestic black money is significantly in rotation and is also part and parcel of the what one can call productive activity. Whether one likes it or not is a separate type of a issue. But global is something different. Global is enormous amount of implication for countries like ours. We'll just come to that in a minute. First and foremost is, everybody says, why now these tax havens have become a huge amount of issue? Suddenly, in the last 2-3 years. If you go back in history, in 1998 or 2000, they were not even mentioned as tax havens. They were all called as innovative financial centers, offshore financial centers. They were all, appreciated. And Economist and Wall Street Journal used to write, emerging markets like India should try to emulate these emerging, these innovative financial centers. And they are something like more than 70 in number at that time. Everybody used to advertise also they are tax havens. If you go into the website, they will say how to start an account. You come to us type of a soliciting another thing. There is enormous amount of, but as in life, as in management, the reasons for success becomes the causes of failure. So the reasons for success of these tax havens, if you observe for the last 15-20 years, the same reasons became the causes of their current, what one can call, difficulties. To the extent, many of them even do not want to say they are tax havens. They say we are not tax havens. They are actually, something different. Don't call us as, and then don't use words like secrecy, another thing for us, another thing. So there used to be a huge amount of enthusiasm about these offshore financial centers. What was the nature of the enthusiasm? If you look at data as early as 2006, 50% of the global trade used to be done by these tax havens. 50% of the global trade. As well as banking financial activity, estimate is anything upward of 60% is through the tax havens in some way or other. It could be that facilitating processes, the software development, IT development and other. So the classic example always given is you have the banana from Nicaragua and sold in London. London it is sold for £6 or £5 or something. And the origin Nicaragua, it could be something like 50 or 80 cents. So the gap is allocated among various tax havens. So finally what happened, UK is not getting its required, what one can call, taxation out of this entire transaction which is taking place. Same thing about several other commodities and several other. So allocation of what one can call the transfer pricing mechanism basis to various of these centers, which facilitated large number of global corporations to save on their tax. That's only what one can call a minor part of the story. What happened actually, two things took place. One is the 9/11, and everyone is aware of it in terms of the impact it created on US and other things. Much later, 3 years, 4 years later, slowly they were trying to understand. They found some portions of the financing has been done through the tax haven. So that is the first and foremost issue in terms of, actually, George Bush, what one can call, in a sense, bullied the European Commission. In Belgium, they have a central depository of all the bank transaction information that practically bullied and then collected it. Originally, it was not supposed to be given another. Then they found out that these tax havens are also used for the activities like terror financing. So there is, in a very, Indian context, we can put it, there is a vegetarian black money and non-vegetarian black money. I being a vegetarian, I try to. So non-vegetarian black money is pertaining to this drug trafficking, this terrorism and other type of activity. Vegetarian is pure tax evasion and trying to hide funds. Do not mix up, that doesn't mean that, non-vegetarian don't store funds or something. From Indian context, the pure vegetarians are the ones who have kept lot amount of funds in various tax havens. They don't even take onion or garlic. So that type of I do not want to get into various other controversies now. So this is one thing which created a negative implication. Second is the 2008 recession. 2007, 2008. 2008 was the peak period. And everybody used to ask me also that time in seminars, as a finance professor, you are supposed to respond. How long it will take? Then I asked them, how long, where? And no, we are talking about economy. Which economy? For many in India, economy means US economy. They don't even think of, there is something called a Indian economy. How long it will take? I normally used to say 40 quarters. They used to look at me and go away. I used to be alone eating my lunch. 40 quarters, 40 quarters divided by 4, 10 years. And today, if they ask, I am telling 80 quarters. But we do not know what would. But these have comprehensively demolished. Once you destroy it, what happens? Basically, you are nationalizing families. So what is the problem of Europe to a large extent? Problem of USA is families have been nationalized and corporates have been privatized. Families are nationalized means what? Elderly people have to be taken care by the government. Unwed, or single parent mothers have to be taken care by the government. Children have to be healthcare benefit by government. So who is your father and who is your mother? Prime Minister and Queen of England. I'm serious about it. There are large number of families in London where there are no fathers, but there is a television for the children. Number of television for the children is more than number of fathers. Families have lost control in terms of telling the kids, you can't go and riot on the street. And not a single equipment, television or music system or anything looted by the children have been returned by the family anywhere in London, Greater London. Not a single item. You don't have any single parent feeling that the boy has brought this item, he has looted it and we should. No. It's a tragic situation which is expected to occur. I have been in Manchester, I was teaching there. If you go on a weekend to any of the ordinary streets of London, you think as if a war has taken place the previous day. Because all the youngsters are in pubs. It's a nation which is complete, and this our honorable Tatas went and invested there and complains after on Friday 3 o'clock, I don't get any managers. Obviously, you won't get them. Good he didn't invest in Italy or France, because on Thursday itself you won't get anybody for his meetings. See, those are declining societies. In Clapham, my friend wrote me a mail. Every shop was looted, one shop was left alone, not touched by these people. You know what is that shop? A bookshop. You can imagine where we are heading for. It's a declining society. US is a declining empire. I used to tell the bureaucrats and the people, you must internalize. Sir, how do we internalize? One finance ministry official asked me. I told, every day morning you get up, have your bath and other thing, 108 times you chant, US is a declining empire. US is a declining empire. We have in our southern India, we have Ashtotra, we call it, for Shiva or Vishnu. Every day morning we get up, after that we begin to chant 108 times or 1008, depending upon the time availability. Same way you should. He was actually shocked. Are you really? I'm really telling. But if I tell you are not going to accept or believe, if a plumber from Washington comes and tells you, as an expert in finance, that US is a declining empire. That is a good point. Because a professor from Bangalore, it's all right, sir, he will tell so many things. But a plumber from New York is enormously appreciated another thing. So the Europe is in deep recession. It is not going to come out immediately, I can assure you. And unfortunately, if I say this, many people will not, because the reason is very simple, including me, all of our umbilical cords are tied with US and Europe. Umbilical cord, I mean, in terms of a lot of our children are getting educated there. A lot of our investment is there. A lot of our enthusiasm, culture, art, music, getting funds. This has been not today or yesterday. It has been going on for a very long period of time. It is extremely difficult as Indians in 1950 to realize that something different has taken place after independence. Same way, it will take some 10 to 20 years for us to realize that it is in a decline. Could be too late. The reason why I am stressing this point is the decline of the West, something which I am putting it dramatically, is a prerequisite for the rise of the East. Total is 100. Total is 100. I think all of you will agree. 100 mean 100%, I mean. Except Musharraf, we used to talk about 400%. That we will not get into. We are, 100%. 1820, ourselves and China had nearly 50% of the global GDP. 1820. Not very far. Not very back. I am not going into Vedic times or anything. This is the Angus Madison's famous study of OECD, which by now is fairly known. Where was different type of countries. And so that 1820, when we were in 50%, other countries had 15% in that fashion. Now today again we have to retrieve. Actually, whenever people talk India as an emerging power, I always feel, they do not understand. We are not an emerging power. We have emerged a long time before. We are retrieving our position where we were, actually. Because there is a lot of misconception. Our GDP, if you look at Angus Madison's OECD study, which is from the Oxford, because again, if I say something here, nobody is going to. So this study very clearly establishes that actually as early as 16, 17, 18, 1820 was the last period. After that, the decline started for us. So it is not that we were not entrepreneurial or we were extraordinarily materialistic and entrepreneurial. This is something I want to stress. It's not that all of us were, inside the caves and inhaling and exhaling. No, sir. That some people might have been doing. But predominantly we were entrepreneurial country. And we were, actually what is happening in India today, again the same thing. Vaishyavization is taking place. Everybody is becoming a Vaishya. All are Vaishyas. Government employees, of course, have already become Vaishyas long time before. In terms of, the business, market forces should operate. My earlier teacher, the current PM says, I wrote him a letter. Already market forces are fully operative in government. You don't have to worry. Nothing is get done without market forces, except unfortunately asymmetric information. I don't know how much he expects. Whether I am giving too much or too low. There is a huge amount of, so otherwise everybody is, so we had something like 50% of the global share of the economy. Again, we have to have the same 50%. And how will we have 50 to 60%? Others have to You can't have any other alternative. The decline of the West is actually going to be a major